Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to continue now with our classic anime review series, and we're going to concentrate now on one of my all-time most favourite animes ever, and that is Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. And this is really a truly special standout anime. This is the one that really got me big time into anime, and along with the other animes that were broadcast late night on Channel 4 years gone by, but this was the real one that really kind of got me very much into anime and really got me infused in how to draw the characters and draw the animation style alike. It's an adaptation, as we all know, of the famous computer game franchise Street Fighter 2. For me, still the best fighting game of all time, despite your Mortal Kombats and your Killer Instincts, etc. For me, Street Fighter 2 still rules as the best fighting game of all time. And this animation here remains for me the best screen adaptation of the franchise. We've had other adaptations, of course. We've had the infamous 1994 movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia and Kylie Minogue, released in the same year. We've also had various other animes based on the kind of later adaptations of the computer game. So I think there's been one based on Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter Generations. You've had multiple other adaptations and animations, but none of them, they come even close to touching how good and how great that this animation version is. It was released in 1994 by Manga Entertainment, but over time you've had various dubs, various censored versions of it. There was more recently a Blu-ray version released by Animes, I think back in 2013 or 14, that had some censorship of the foul language, but I believe there's been a further Blu-ray release a couple of years ago where you can get the full uncut American version. So you just have to shop around for the various remastered versions or uncensored versions of Iconic. I would highly recommend that you do watch the Americanized version with the great soundtrack, of which I will refer to later on within this review. So the original setup of this is that we have the best and most powerful fighters around the world being tracked down by the mysterious crime organisation known as Shadowlaw, headed by the powerful leader Bison, and we get various scenes where we've seen the various cyborgs tracking down these fighters, and we see them listing down all their stats and all their special abilities and powers alike, and they all culminate in an overall fighting capacity. And the two fighters that Shadowlaw and Bison are sorting after the most are the Japanese vagabond Ryu and the martial arts champion Ken Masters. And we also have the storyline of the MI6 Interpol organisation headed by agents Guile and Chun-Li, who both have their own personal motivations for tracking down Bison. So that is basically the setup, which is the basic premise. Get various amounts of action scenes and fight sequences alike on here, really showcasing most of the characters within the original Street Fighter 2 video game, which is what you expect. So what is so great about this? Why does this rank amongst what I believe amongst the true upper echelon of animes, perhaps even the greatest anime of all time? Well, first off is the animation, and it's incredible. The art style that's used for the characters is fantastic. You know, this is a highly production anime on here. I think the budgeted was around 6 million at the time, so they really went all out and invested a lot of time and effort into making sure this was a true cinematics experience. And you can see it from the way all the backgrounds and the music and the atmosphere is set along. It's all fantastic on here, but particularly the way that the characters are drawn. Now they've gone for a much more of a realistic, mature kind of look, detailed hand-drawn approach, where a lot of the characters are very big and bulky and muscular. If you look at particular the likes of Sagat and T-Hawk in the scenes that they're in, they're very huge and bulky alike, and I like that. I always prefer that style. I hate the fact that if you look at the later adaptations, they've gone for a much more simplified, cartoony, kind of almost kiddie orientated style, especially if you look at the Street Fighter Alpha kind of animes on there, and it just, for me, takes away the verve and the energy away from the animation itself. But this version here, the characters are really boldly drawn and they're very vividly drawn, and I love all that. It just makes it, gives that more mature feel towards the animation on here. As well, we have the backgrounds detailed landscapes. They've gone for this kind of painted, matted look. If you look at the particular scenes where we see Ryu training in the mountains and we see the Shadowlaw fortress, we see the backgrounds, they're kind of more painted and simulated in with the animated movements on it, but it looks great on it. It's got this very seamless feel. It all looks fantastic, and like I said, the whole kind of cinematic experience that gives you feel. I've always mentioned all the time that the best movies or animations, if you like, are the ones that don't feel like animations. They feel cinematic. They feel like you're watching an actual movie on here, and that's what we get with here, particularly with the animation. What makes it also great is the fight sequences themselves. Now, this is what you would expect when you're adapting, as I said before, a fighting video game. We've seen various ones in the past, the likes of Tekken or Fatal Fury. Most recently, we had the Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge animation, but none of them come anywhere close to matching the great sequences that we have on it. Every fight sequence is great in its fluidity, in its choreography, in its animation. Almost every one is standout. The ones I highlight the most in particular is the opening fight between Ryu and Sagat. Just great visualization and atmospheric build up. We see them fighting in between the credits rolling, and the music and the way just the atmosphere and the background as they fight in the lightning is all fantastic. It all culminates in that, for me, that truly iconic shot where we see Ryu transmitting the Hadouken for the first time. It's a truly thrilling moment. I can always remember firstly watching this movie and I was just jaw dropped on the floor, the way that they visualized, the way that Ryu, he's standing in that pose, and then we see the electricity consuming his body, and then he kind of gets that massive pose with the two hands clenched together and fires the Hadouken. It's just magnificent. It's all magnificent. The fight scene as well with Ryu and Fei Long, truly great as well. The way that they set it up, we get this slow motion face off between the two, and we get this intense combinations and choreography. It's all fantastic. Probably the most standout fight sequence, as many people who've watched this anime, is of course the Chun-Li and Vega. Fantastic. The way that the atmosphere and the tension and the sequence is set up as we see Chun-Li in her apartment, and then they use a lot of silent moments in between the great tense music before we get a full-on, really grunge rock banging soundtrack song as these two are fighting in the apartment. It's just fantastic. It's just great to watch visually, just exciting, just really compels you to the screen. And then one thing I also noted about this, that they really had, if you like, a restraint in how they showed the characters transmitting their powers and abilities. You think when you're adapting any kind of video game or comic book adaptation, the animated format would have more license, if you like, to show all the special moves and all the special abilities and projectiles and energy waves, as opposed to a live action, which would always be restricted by budget. And because you're live action, you'd always go for a much more grounded, realistic visualization of the powers. But here, we kind of had a more realistic tone here. Yes, they do the special abilities, so we see the spinning bird kick and the Hadouken and the dragon punch. We see all of that, the sonic boom. We see all the trademark special moves that we associate with the characters from the game, but they don't have them using them kind of willy-nilly. They have this where it takes a true effort to use these special powers. So we get the fight sequences where they're using the hand-to-hand combat, and there's a build-up to these special techniques, which makes them stand out more. If you have people using special techniques here, there and everywhere, they lose their value. But if you have it where two combatants are fighting and then all of a sudden there's a real build up and there's a real kind of setup towards the special moves and the energy waves that they use, it just makes it really pop out more and adds a more thrill to the fight sequences. So they did such a brilliant job of making sure that all the special moves that they use from the game are really standout moments. And it just, again, gives it that more maturity, gives it that more on an adult feel to it, that you're not just watching a typical just throwaway, disposable kind of animation here. They really took their time in making sure that the attacks were special and had that individual quality. We move on again to the storyline. Now, okay, it's not the most complicated or the most philosophical story matter here. We're not talking anything like your Ghost in the Shell or Akira, but it's still a good sound narrative here as we see the connection between Ryu and Ken, and we get these great sequences where we see the flashback scenes, have their training, and we also establish well good motivations for Chun-Li and Guile, whose friend and father were both killed by Bison. So we get a good chemistry between Guile and Chun-Li, and again, there's none of this kind of woke agenda between the two. One's trying to one up each other. They establish very much so why they want to fight and take down Bison, and there's a good rapport between the two characters. So in terms of characterization, it's mainly focused on Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li and Guile. And Bison himself as a villain is fantastic. You know, he's intelligent, he's imposing, he's evil, he's clearly the most powerful fighter out of all of them. And I always say, whenever you're adapting any movie or any storyline or any comic book adaptation, it's always best to have the villain be the most powerful character, because then that makes the struggle against him even more compelling to watch. So I think from a characterization point of view, those are the ones that stood out well. The other characters within the game, they're really just more there to be involved in the fight sequences. They're not bad visualizations, but they're not as involving characters as such as the ones I mentioned before. But you do get an overall good story. It's a very measured and approached narrative to, you know, what is essentially a fighting game. Okay, we do have multiple fight sequences, but at the end of the day, there's still a good narrative plot and structure within the storyline. What is another amazing factor of this is the music and the original score and soundtrack. Now, I want to be very clear here of how special this truly is. Now, you can get various dubs, and I know people have maybe mentioned that the Japanese version is superior, but for me, no. The original soundtrack of this is truly fantastic. Now, I think the original American score was composed by Corey Lirios and John Andrea, and everything from the main theme of the Street Fighter theme to the sequences that I mentioned before, in particular where we see Ryu training in the mountains and we see the flashbacks of him and Ken in the early stages of their training when they're training in the woods, and we see the kind of back and forth between them. But it's truly magnificent. You get a great kind of really haze, kind of misty feel towards it. Now, I think the soundtrack or the song used in these sequences is called Hallucinations by In the Nursery. If you go through the soundtrack credits, again, anybody correct me if I'm getting that wrong, but I just love the kind of simple kind of piano tones that we see on here that really kind of adds that mystery, if you like, and it really kind of just heavenly like glow, if you like, to when we see these flashback sequences back and again, and we see later on with Ken and he's struggling to find his fighting ability again, and the words mix between the two, and as he's rediscovering his fighting form. It's just great. I just love it so much. Just that really kind of hum tone on it. It's fantastic, and we get this real fusion of the soundtrack with this really American grunge rock soundtrack. If you are into that, you'll know straight away the songs from the likes of bands such as Alice in Chains and Korn and Silverchair. And I love the scenes where we see Ken driving in his Porsche, and we really see this pumping grunge soundtrack as he's playing throughout, as he's driving throughout the streets on there with his girlfriend in the Porsche. I just love it. It's just great, and I think it's always important to have a really brilliant soundtrack that just compels you again, just keeps you watching. It just adds to the atmosphere, adds to the characterization, and it adds to the fight sequences. It's just all brilliant. It's just all outstanding. I can't overemphasize enough how brilliant the soundtrack here is. And of course, if you've got the best sound system that you have, the best sound surround stereo system, you want to turn the volume up as high as possible and just really just enjoy the soundtrack as it integrates very much within the fight sequences and the story beats alike on it. Really, I was blown away when I first watched it. I think, wow, this is incredible. This is probably the most incredible anime I've ever seen. And even now, I've watched it multiple times, 20, 30 times since, all the way back in the early 90s when it was released on VHS. You know, I've got the original VHS as well as the Blu-ray and the DVD, and I'm still blown away about it. I never get tired of watching it. I just think it's a really cinematic, immersive experience, top-notch animation, really brilliant soundtrack and music on here, and it holds up today. Absolutely, animation holds up today. Still superior to a lot of the modern day anime that we see around today, and hands down superior to any of the previous incarnations of Street Fighter that we had following on from this initial release. So, if I had to give an overall score I'm gonna give myself a bit of leeway. I have thought about giving it a 10 out of 10, but obviously 10 out of 10 you do hold everything under scrutiny. So I'm gonna give this a 9.8 out of 10. I just think brilliant visualization of the IP of the franchise. If you want to be hypercritical, maybe it's a bit lacking in the story department. Maybe there are other characters that don't get the same kind of shine and the same kind of focus that the others do. Maybe they could have been a bit more in depth in terms of the story. But I think you have to understand that this is a fighting game and you're coming into it to watch these characters on screen transmit their abilities and their fighting skills to the greatness that you want them to be. And this is what this anime does. And again, it's a great visualization of the fighting game. Really, I think it did an even better job than what you could have hoped for. You know, when I watched this for the first time, I didn't really think it was going to be as great as what it did. And the way it handles, you know, all the special moves and the fighting techniques and the characterization, I just thought it was brilliant throughout. So those are my overall thoughts on Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. Again, really amongst that top echelon of animes. Can be disputed whether it's the greatest anime of all times. There are others that I will review shortly that I think can compete with Street Fighter 2 for the greatest anime of all time. But certainly, if you wanted to tell me that you felt this was the best anime ever, you know, I would find it very difficult to disagree with you. I really think it's just brilliant. Just trust me. Even if you watch it now, despite the fact that you've been focused on a lot of modern day anime, whether it's My Hero Academia or Attack on Titan or Dragon Ball Super or One Punch Man, to me this is, you know, really just elite level, greatest of all time potentially anime that you will find on it. You'd be hard pressed to find a lot of anime that is superior to this or any other Street Fighter version that is as good as this. I'm telling you right now, this is amongst the best anime of all time. So those are my thoughts on Street Fighter 2, the animated movie anime. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it's as great as what I'm making it out to be, or do you think there have been other variations of Street Fighter 2 that you found to be superior to this? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Those are my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.